Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a Precipice Fiction podcast. My name is Paddy Boylan, and I am hosting for today. Joining me on today's podcast, we have James Healy.
Hello.
Alex Eldridge.
Hello.
And joining us for the first time ever, our agent abroad, Matan Elul. Matan, welcome.
I hope you did not hype me too much. Hello, guys.
We did. We actually
have a little bit, yeah.
We implied you might be made off as well, so it's good to know that you're not.
Known quantity.
This is great.
Matan lives in a horrible time zone that is very, very different from Sydney Standard Time, and so it's not often that he has the opportunity to join us. But here we are. How are we all, gentlemen?
Great. I'm halfway through my first coffee, so expect generally lucid thoughts. But
your energy levels can only go up from here.
Exactly.
Well, I'm halfway through my first hangover, so onwards and upwards. I feel all right. I had a bit of a big one last
As long
night.
as we shouldn't be concerned for you.
Not immediately.
The topic of the day is character. How do we use it? How do we make characters real? Do we need to make characters real? I'm going to stop second guessing what we're talking about. Characters. What do we think? What do we think about character?
In general,
Wow, the backbone, really, for me, number one, number two is character. Before plot, before settings. I need to care about the who before I care about the what and why.
I actually think I work the opposite way. Character is usually an afterthought after broad themes.
I tend to write. I'll start with the idea, and then once I've got the general premise, I will almost exclusively focus on character until at such a point as I need to bring in the other details, and then I'll do that. But
You're a very character-focused writer, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar to Alex in that I'll start the story maybe with a bit of a blank slate on the character, and then as I'm going through it more and more, they'll become really focused on what their emotions are and why they're doing what they're doing and why they're in this situation, because that's what I feel brings me through the story and gives me the opportunity to have all of the events happen. It's if you care about the character and care about why they're doing what they're doing and where they're going.
Do you guys, when you're writing a character, do you start with the firm idea of, I know exactly who this person is, what their motivations are, blah, 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 or do you, like I do, and the character is just a vehicle for exploring one aspect of the plot, and you just adapt that character as needed as it goes along?
Either or. I actually am 50-50 depending on the story.
Essentially I'll have some idea of how they kind of work, but I won't really know their deepest inner thoughts and desires and where they're going. Like I won't even know necessarily how they're going to finish up until I write until a certain point, and maybe at about 2/3 of the way through the novel I'll be like, oh, that's what's happening there. It's been a bit of a different process with both the two novels that I've written, but yeah, it's a immutable process, I think.
So I try to have a general idea of who the character is, why they're doing things. I wouldn't have the full background story to age 5 ready from the start, but I will have the broad strokes of why they're in the story, why they're behaving the way they are. It's actually the settings that I find that is shifting around the characters all the time when I write. Like the settings would change, the environment, but the characters tend to stick the landing, if that makes sense. They tend to remain mostly stable, especially in the novel I'm working on. The two main characters are like the foundations that aren't moving too much, but everything else, the magic system, the name of the cities, the politics, these kind of come and go as I'm working on it.
I think I'm exactly the opposite of that. That's very interesting. Maybe it's got something to do with what we're interested in as writers. Even when I'm reading, characters are fine. Characters are necessary and they're important.
Well,
that's not why I read.
We've had this discussion. We've had this actual discussion, Paddy and I, before about how like, I will always talk about how I have a real deep and abiding interest in people. I don't mean that to be meritorious. I just find people interesting. Like I could just as easily find cars interesting. It just happens to be people tend to be the things that are most fascinating. So I don't know. I'll find myself at a party just talking to someone and just like they're just telling me about their office job, and I'm just like,
in your head, you're just making them into a fiction character.
Well, not
taking
even
notes.
It's just like, well, probably internally, but I'm also just going, this is really interesting. Like the way you like you've run your life, and like it's I don't know. I just find it fascinating.
And I don't find it interesting at all.
Yeah,
I mean, I do to an extent. Everyone does it to an extent. We're human, but yeah, not as much. I want the big ideas.
I will kind of find if something that's like motivating me to write a story might be like maybe the action of it. Like maybe I'm writing about a character driving down a deserted road and they get held up by like bandits with laser rifles in like a post-apocalyptic setting. And like, that's what I wanted to write about. I'll have the structure and the idea behind that. And then I'll stop and sit down and think, why are they driving down this road? Why have they chosen
Stephen King
this
does
road?
that as well, right?
Who
Doesn't
are
he talk
they?
about he has one scene and then he writes in both directions out from that scene?
Yeah. I get really engrossed then in who this person is and why they're doing what they're doing and what are the stakes and what are the this, and then maybe the laser fight with the bandits kind of falls aside and kind of doesn't really feature the rest
You
of the
take the
story.
proper way. Yeah.
Okay, James. So you start with a situation and you kind of try to fill it with characters. But did you ever feel like the characters kind of took over? I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but did they ever take it away from the situation that you were planning to write on?
Definitely. If I find from trying to develop the character and trying to figure out what is their goal and why have they gone this way, I might be like, you know what, they wouldn't take this road because they're smarter than that, and maybe they know they're just bandits potentially on this road, so they pulled up short and circumnavigated it in some way, and then I'll just be telling a completely different story. But it's like engages me so much more.
They mentioned
how many stories would have ended?
No, you go. No.
How many stories, especially horror stories, would have ended like 50% sooner if the characters were smarter?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
But do we
and then you call the cops. The end.
Yeah. Well, that's the classic horror movie trope, right? Like the two dumb kids who are making out in the bushes, and then the axe murderer jumps out and kills them, and you're like, well, this would be, you know, like, what's that like the Scream cliche about like characters. If they have sex, if they do drugs, or if they drink or something like that.
Oh, really? I never put that together. It's almost like a divine judgment kind
it's
of
like
thing.
spells it out in the Scream movie. It's like Scream's sort of like almost like a parody or like satire of the genre, but not like to scary movie levels.
Do you think that's like a Schadenfreude on the part of the audience? Like secretly they want those?
I think so. Yeah,
killed?
I think it's a morality thing, like a way back Puritan, like, you know, lizard brain Puritan thing where it's like, well, you were fucking, so you need to die. You know, like,
no, it's true. If you watch the early slashers, like the final girl usually never got laid at all. Like maybe until the very end. Like if there are two girls and one of them got laid, she's not the final girl.
We need to write this down as an episode idea for another future episode. Horror as exploring the morality
as a morality tale. Because
they change as well, and they kind of changed the characters and they changed the monsters, because there was always a monster trying to get into the house, and then in more recent times it's a monster that's already in the house that people are kind of realizing as a monster.
Kind
of changing
the
the
real
culture and
monster
stuff
was
like
man.
But I don't know. I mean, the thing that always fascinates me about character is like I find classic protagonists to be pretty bland and boring, generally speaking. Not always.
Classic protagonist.
Exactly. Okay. What is a classic protagonist?
All right. Okay. No. Fair enough. That's fair. Let's say the stereotypical strong hero type. He's noble. He's fairly intelligent. Or it could be a woman just as easily. You know, they're brave, and it's sort of like that can sometimes encapsulate it, because a protagonist is always a cipher for the audience, right? And we want, maybe that's not the right word, but a lens through which the audience can sort of insert themselves into the novel. So you don't want to turn the audience off too much by showing them this person who's kind of nasty, or not exclusively nasty anyway.
That's an interesting point.
So it's easy to fall too far into that. Oh, well, he's just a really good guy, and you know, there's really nothing wrong with him, and I've always found that very boring.
But then at the same time,
So
there's
it's
always
interesting to find that intersection.
there's the old wisdom of don't make your characters unlikable. Your characters have to have something redeemable about them. I don't know if that's true, but people sure as heck say
I'm a
it.
big advocate of that.
Of not
I'm a
making your
big
characters
advocate of,
unlikable?
No, but likable is not. You said something that's a little different. You said redeemable, and
I
likable
didn't
is
mean
not
to if I
exactly
did. I wish I did. Let's say I did.
Well, okay, maybe not likable, but you gotta give them something that makes them feel like they have another dimension. They cannot just be one thing. Even if that thing is good, they cannot be just good. And on the other hand, they cannot be just bad. They cannot be just greedy. That can't be their character. And naturally, the more layers you add, one of them are going to be something we can sympathize with.
Which is I read this. There's this really, really good level thing, which is I might even add it as like some multimedia thing for the episode. But basically, it's a breakdown of like how villains work, and the top tier of villain is like the bottom tier is something like a villain who's just evil because like just for the sake of being evil, like. I guess
Iago from Shakespeare.
Yeah,
the guy is just he's like, yeah, I'm evil.
Yeah,
not a badly written character.
Let's say the mustache twirling guy with the top hat who's tying the girl, like that kind of evil, like that's but then the top level of evil is like an evil that is so understandable that the villain's motive is actually better than the hero's motivation. Like the villain's motivation to thwart the hero is actually more redeemable than the hero's motivation. So there's something in that conflict there, that contrast between like, well, he's bad, but I can see why he's bad. You know, it's understandable why he's bad. And then there's all degrees of gray area in between that as well. But yeah, that's always the fascinating little paradox there, just the different shades of that.
James, are you going to say something?
I was going to just on terms of like when a character is altogether good, there's almost no room for them to change because they are complete at that point.
Superman syndrome, right?
Yeah,
like Superman is a boring superhero because
they're going to be like a flat character throughout the story, and there are stories that work with flat characters, but then it tends to dictate how the story is going to go. So you can't really necessarily have them. No, I don't have anywhere for that sentence to end.
Let me ask this then.
But that was a really good start to the sentence.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, if you need characters to develop, do you need all the characters to develop? And what determines one, what development is, two, what characters need to develop?
So what is like your favorite all-time character development? Do you have a specific character that you said, wow, that arc, that was great? I'll start with a character that I really like, and I think most people listening knows, and that's let's go with Tyrion from A Song of Ice and Fire, better known as Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Now Tyrion is liked by most readers from the start, even though he's presented early on as this guy. Look, he goes to prostitutes. He's part of the family of the bad guys, the Lannisters. He's a dwarf. He's physically, he's a cripple. He's all these things. But we kind of start up front with the bad, with the drinking, with the whoring, and then we get to the good. He gives this really nice advice to Jon, who is this character we sympathize with, because Jon is this bastard, and Tyrion gives all these great lines about it. But that's not where the character stops. That could have been the character for 7 books, and that would have been okay. But George R.R. Martin takes him to a journey. He learns to be more responsible. He learns to be genuinely caring, not just give good advice. He actually sacrifices himself for others.
But at the same time, there's also a big cost on the character. Like the character suffers and they transform in part for the worse. Like by the end, he's much less funny, much more jaded, much more callous. Yeah, it's almost like the character needs to if they start out good, it's like, okay, well, then they're inherently good. If they earn the virtue that they gain, they seem all the better for it.
I just feel like not in the terms of good and evil, but like just quality character. You could have taken both versions of Tyrion, and both of them are excellent characters, like on either spectrum, three-dimensional, interesting. So imagine doing an arc between them. That's just, spoiling us as readers.
Good example. Yeah, Tyrion, absolutely.
My one, I think, would be Harold Lautner from Surprise, a Stephen King novel, The Stand.
That's who I was going to say as well.
Who's Harry?
Okay. So, I guess I'll try not to ruin it too much, but basically the journey that he goes on, he starts off as this sort of nerdy kid, and he kind of has a crush on this girl, and basically like he goes through like a series of sort of events, and he's kind of erring to the side of being evil, and then he changes back to being good, and then right at the end there's this moral quandary that he has to make, and basically what he does determines a small part of what goes on in the book, but he kind of makes it a choice. And just watching that, it's hard to really explain it properly without
he is like wavering on a line.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The exciting thing is about it, he's constantly going back and forth between these. Oh, is he going to go that way, or is he going to go that way? And in the end, he goes one way, and you're like, oh, okay. I don't know, James. What do you think? How would you describe Harold Lautner's arc?
100% the same way. Is that when the story is finished, you're like, oh, it was this type of arc. But because of the way the story is told, you don't know which way he's going to go. And is it a positive change, a negative change, a flat arc? You don't know where he is, and it makes him an incredibly dynamic character to follow at points where he is quite unlikable, and then at points where he kind of is coming into his own and it becomes very likable, and then there's points where you're just not sure about him, and it just makes him, he's magnetic on the page, and even in the recent Stephen King adaptation, really, really well adapted. Like, he's great in that as well. It is just this up and down, and it's unpredictable.
You can't see it, but they're doing the thing with their finger.
Oh yeah. For anyone who's just listening, we're like waving our hands back.
They're doing this thing with the finger.
We need to get better at that.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah, that is it. The character could take any direction, and that makes it a very interesting arc to follow.
Yeah.
I mean, Walter White.
Oh yeah,
Breaking Bad.
Oh, cool.
I'm not going to say it wouldn't be good, but that whole show is watching a man break bad. It's and if he'd started as, okay, spoiler, Walter White turns into a pretty harsh motherfucker. Mm-hmm. If he'd started as that character, we wouldn't like him and we wouldn't relate to him. It's the fact that it's like the opposite of a Tyrion Lannister, right? The fact that he starts out with this really sympathetic situation, he's this nice guy, bad things always happen to him. And then we have to carry the emotional baggage of feeling for this guy through the whole thing, and we find ourselves liking them even though he's not a good person.
No.
He's the one who knocks.
But you know something? You know what I love about Walter White and Breaking Bad in general is that I think that a good character arc is rooted, like, from the second you read or see the character, there's already hints of what's under. And you can see, I don't know if you guys remember, in the first episode, he gets the absolute shit with his boss at the car wash. And we get to see, like, season 4, season 3, Walter White, like, just, blasting this guy, just like giving him the crap, like, I'm quitting, I'm not into this. And I like this hint, this reveal that kind of, and later on, if you ever rewatch the show, you kind of like, yeah, you could tell what's simmering under.
That's the whole thing about the Greek tragedy, right? Like, the seeds of the character's downfall have to be in the character to begin with. That's what makes it tragic. It's not just.
So how do you sow seeds in a book? Obviously, in a TV show, you get to show expressions, tone of voice. You get to see, the eye twitch. So how do you do it in writing? How do you put these seeds in a way that's not too obvious, but sticks with the reader?
Writing from other characters' points of views is a really good way of doing it, where you have one part of the story told from inside the character's head, and they know how they are interpreting everything, and then you have another view from them from the outside, where it's like, oh, they're not quite the person that they think they are. They're not coming across to others the way that they think they are.
I actually really like that as a technique, because it also does the whole, like, everyone thinks they're a good guy in their own head, like everyone's the good guy in their own narrative, and then shifting the perspective is almost like a reminder to the reader that don't take this character's word for it. Like, don't just assume that
unreliable narrator.
It is almost a little bit of unreliable narrator. I really want to play with that now.
I'd like to point out the fact that all the characters that we picked there were all to some degree, I'd say, anti-heroes, but definitely there was this really strong moral, ethical quandary, and I think that's maybe something that's very, very strong. Like someone, that's the light and shade. Like, they're good, but they're also bad, and they could kind of go either way. And to a lesser or a further extent, they kind of do at some point. We still don't know where Tyrion's arc is going to go in the books, but
I guess we don't. I haven't read the books, but yeah,
that's something I absolutely love in characters, that kind of like anti-hero vibe.
100%.
I was going to point out that, James, I cannot think of a single character you've written that is inherently good. Like, they're all just, they're all just people, and they could go either way.
Yeah,
maybe that little blind girl. The little blind girl is inherently good, but everybody else.
The characters that are good in James' novel are the ones that are going to die. All the characters,
but they're not good. Like, what's good about them?
They're just a good person in a bad world, and life's dealt them a hand. But
they're
going to get through this. It's going to be harsh, and they've got a guilty conscience because they're a good person. They're the ones that. It's the anti-slasher, man.
Look, no sport. No spoilers, but in the story that James has coming out fairly soon, no spoilers. Like, no spoilers. I'm not spoiling, but
we
like the guy that would have the thing, the guy that would have the thing happen to him would have done the thing to the other guy if he could have done it.
Oh, you don't know.
That's actually so vague. I don't know what you're talking about. So
no, I know what you mean.
I know.
The thing with the thing, and the other.
You're saying if the roles were reversed, it would have turned out the same way.
Exactly.
Oh no!
I
don't like to think
that's
that, because that sullies the character. I don't think he would.
But no one's going to have any idea what we're talking about here.
Well, that's actually all the more reason to read episode 1 of the Precipice Fiction Anthology, which will be coming out sometime in the next 12 months. We hope you can find out exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. I was just working for this plug. That's all I was doing.
Matan, marketing extraordinaire Matan.
There we go.
All right.
But how do you think we make characters more what do you call it? Like, more realistic? Let's move away from like likable for a second and think like what really defines something as like, oh, I can believe this is a person. Like, I can see how this is a person. Like, does it just come down to the I
think just something that lands in both of those places, and I think having characters have
both of
universal wants or realistic emotional responses to the things that are happening make them both likable and realistic and relatable as well. If your character is going through something, even if the character is like a spacefaring pirate, but the issue that they're dealing with is
not enough rum.
Parents aren't proud of them.
This is
why
they're
doing a dodgy spacefaring pirate job, but they're pretending to their parents that they're quite successful at something else, and they're just trying to look for that big haul so they can come back to the family reunion in like a nice spacesuit and look like they've made it. So you've got a fantastic story.
Space turkey.
Come over some space turkey, some nice delicious space turkey.
Turkey with the family.
Dialogue is an important one. I feel I'm reading a Bret Easton Ellis novel right now. I read Lesson Zero and American Psycho years ago and really enjoyed them, but I'm reading his middle one, Rules of Attraction, right now, and the dialogue is just so pithy. It's just it's just like they're almost saying nothing to each other, because that's how people talk. You're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll see you later for the thing. Yeah. Oh yeah, whatever. Like, it's just it's hard to explain, but it is very like just.
Yeah, I read of Mice and Men not long ago, and it's amazing that the characters, like, there's so many. There's actually moments where the characters don't hear each other and say, "What did you say?" But it doesn't feel extraneous. It feels real. I don't know how he does it. He dances on the verge of like, this dialogue is pointless and doesn't need to be here. Yeah. It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like absolutely authentic. Really,
it's got a good ear, I reckon.
Very difficult to do, because that's like exactly what I was thinking when Alex was describing that kind of like that pithy kind of dialogue. It's like you often see that done often not very well, and you're kind of like, oh, let's kind of get through this.
Aaron
this.
Sorkin,
So,
like I like his stuff, but his characters are all just
really,
Aaron
Well, it's
love
too
his dialogue. That's crazy.
Sorkin.
It's like you
Then
don't
going
like.
back to what James said, I think you really hit the nail on the head with wants and desires. I think that's like one of the most important things. Don't forget to give your characters something they want. Every character needs to want something. Maybe it's not featured because it's a very small character, but even that tiny character has to be in the room for a reason. They need to have a goal. Maybe they get it, maybe they don't. And that leads me to the next thing, is I think something that really adds a lot to character is failures and mistakes. The more they don't get what they want, the more real they feel, because look, this world, sometimes it sucks. We all know what it's like not to get what we want. And it makes us feel like, okay, this guy's real. He tried to ask her on a date, she threw a soda in his face, but that kind of stuff.
I can actually see that in your writing, because from reading Glyph Life, you've got like a lot of characters.
My characters fuck up, big time.
Yeah.
But as well as that, like even like smaller characters, like you get in behind their wants and you get an idea of what they're doing and why they're there and what they're about. And it makes all of your characters jump off the page and feel like they're really living out the story.
Oh.
Yeah, no, they all have a sense of like I don't know how to say this in a way that that is actionable, but like they all have a lot of heart. You know what I mean? They feel realized. They're not one of them maybe is inherently bad. In Glyphlight, I'm thinking specifically, but they're maybe not entirely, but they're all very. I don't know. They're all very realized, and they're all very like this. This is what I want. This is what I'm going for. This is my relationship with this person. This is how we're going to interact. And there's a richness to them. I know that sounds very fluffy and airy fairy, but there is something about them that feels completed in a sense. They don't feel flat. Characters good.
For you guys, because Matan's characters are often good characters in a bad world, and what's nice is you see their goodness shining through, even though the events around them are really, really bad. What about characters who aren't good? Like we were talking before about the wisdom that you can't write a character that isn't likable. Can you though? Because every rule has exceptions. Are there characters that they're really not likable? Maybe they have no redeeming features or few redeeming features, but they still are engaging characters to read about.
I think we need to define likable.
Yeah.
Because likable doesn't necessarily mean, they're like a nice character, or they're like a kind of like, it doesn't necessarily mean like, how do I describe it?
That's true. A character can be intriguing.
A character can be like, you can make a character likable by making them very dynamic. If they're moving the story forwards, if they're active within the story, that's a good way of making them likable. But they can be like an absolutely horrible person. Queen, you bring up Game of Thrones again, Queen Cersei, when it becomes from her point of view, she's taking action and she's making things happen in the story, but she's totally vile. But her chapters are all really interesting because she's changing events and the plot is moving forwards constantly. And that makes a character like interesting to follow, which is what I think likable also means. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're like a nice character or a nice person.
Characters full of energy are likable or followable or engaging is probably a better word. They arrest the attention, characters that are making things happen, moving, expending energy to make things happen.
Exactly. I think Alex got it right. It's a character that shifts the world around it. It's an interesting character to follow. A character that just kind of watches isn't. But going back to your question, Paddy, I'll do two really, I think, well-known references. One is to Spider-Man 1, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So you guys are old enough to know that one. So you know how the Green Goblin tells him you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain?
I didn't know that was what that was from, but good.
Oh, so I think in good quality literature, in quality literature, you either die the villain or you live long enough to see yourself become the hero. And my example is, I'll take it, full-blown hero, but look at a character that early on was just annoying, despicable, no one liked it, Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter. As the books went along, suddenly we care about him. Suddenly he's asked to kill Dumbledore and he doesn't want to. Suddenly he's a human. Sorry. Come on, they came out in 2007. But you get it. If you haven't read it, it's your fault.
Like last week.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, you can't have a character on screen for too long without giving it something. It would just lose interest. If
what about Crabbe and Doyle?
He's annoying.
Who's Crabbe and Doyle?
No, Crabbe and Boyle. One of them died in the flames, and one of them changed his mind.
Yeah, one of them had a big character change.
That's true. Yeah. Oh yes, no, that's true.
One of them was like, okay,
I'm so lost. Everyone is listening, who doesn't know Harry Potter at this point, is just switching off.
Sorry.
No, continue. Like, we're in the minority. There's like 3 of us.
I mean, 500 million copies sold.
Yeah.
We know. We know.
Do
you want to do a little bit of light reading, Paddy, just to catch up to this episode? We're not going to have to.
I rest my case.
You're right though. Like, they do change. Right. One dies, and then one as a villain, and then
we're still on Crabbe and Doyle, are we?
On the other hand, okay, do you guys know, I talk about Kurt Vonnegut Jr. too much, but do you know Slaughterhouse 5?
Yes.
Well, anyone who doesn't out there who's listening, the main character is called Billy Pilgrim. And Billy Pilgrim, I don't think he instigates any action. Things just happen to him, and he kind of just reacts. If he does take action, it's not very often, and it is in any big plot-changing modes. He is like the exact opposite of, and you're right, it is good advice to have a character take action. Like, you do want an active character. But like with everything, there's exceptions to the rule. He's written this book where you feel so bad for this character and you feel so much for him. Taking no action is almost his biggest character point. He is absolutely passive.
I know what makes him likable. It is that he is suffering throughout the story.
Yeah.
He's having heaps and heaps of suffering thrown upon him.
And he commits no sin.
Yeah.
He does nothing wrong.
It's also a story that jumps around into like what's happening. So you're not spending too long in any one, like, the whole story isn't about him during the war and then after the war and then the stuff that he's imagining. It's all interspliced. So you're reading it trying to keep up with the perspective changing and the events changing around him. So there's a trick going on there with the writing.
Sorry? I spoke over you. No, you go.
I was just saying, there's a technique going on there with the writing, keeping things dynamic, but then the character is quite engaging because he's lived through this horrible thing. And I think the first chapter basically acknowledges that he's had this horrible thing happen to him and then like hasn't known how to write about it. And this is how he has written about it. So that sets it up to be very engaging as well. There's an element of this is a true story going on.
Sure. And like with a lot of science fiction writers, it's the ideas, I think, more than the characters that are moving that book along. Kurt Vonnegut Jr. is telling you it's like a manifesto of his beliefs. And the character's there and he has some wonderful characters, but it's not really about that. And that, I think, is a very science fiction thing. Like, there's a lot of science fiction writers that can't write characters that well.
There's a lot of them.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. There is a book I think of that has that does have a really, really strong focus on character, or at least psychology. It does sort of treat the characters as objects a bit, but their emotions and what they're going through and what they're experiencing is very, very important to the story. And that is Ender's Game. Don't watch the movie; it's terrible. But the book is, when I read it, probably my favorite science fiction book of all time. I'm not sure if I reread it now, it would fill that space because I
remember it being really good. That twist at the end.
Oh, it's just but that's
the characters are very passive. Things are just sort of happening to at least the main character.
Well, I mean, he's making things happen. He's working through that little video game thing and like trying to solve.
Yeah, that was the worst part of the book
and stuff. I think he's, like things are happening, but he's but that's an example of science fiction specifically where where the character is less of it depends. I suppose it depends on what you define as a vehicle. But I don't know. I thought those were pretty well drawn characters, at least to some degree.
So basically, we're admitting that if there's any genre that can get away with blander characters, it's sci-fi, because everything else is so awesome.
I hate that.
Isaac Asimov can make a whole career with completely cardboard characters, then yes.
Like Gene Wolfe is a bit like that.
But like,
I mean, a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And again, Gene Wolfe is all about philosophy. So,
but that's the thing. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Is that, look, if any future Asimov is listening to this podcast, if you write good sci-fi with good characters, you'll be freaking legendary.
Yeah.
Because like Ender's Game,
one's ever done
Alex
it.
is.
I don't mean that.
No, it is done. Just some of us neglect one aspect because the other one is good enough to get it published. I guess.
Yeah. Who does this well? What's his name? He wrote the Wasp Factory, Paddy. His sci-fi.
Oh, Ian Banks or Ian M. Banks. I don't remember which of those two wrote the Wasp Factory.
Banks. It's Ian M. Banks. He does characters quite well. Like, but he's all about the. He that's a very good blend, I think, of character and sci-fi.
Agreed.
At the moment, I've just started reading Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, I've never seen the film, which was really good.
I absolutely love the film. I think it's great. So I wanted to see what the book was like. You get a little bit more context for the characters' worldviews early on in the story.
Yeah,
and as a result of that, I think it makes them both a lot more realistic than they are in the film. Not that I think that's a negative in the film. I think they're fantastic characters. I think their otherworldliness and their idiosyncraticness is so engaging. But in the book, there's an element of Louis' character seeing their eternal life as a gift. And
is Louis Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise?
Brad Pitt. I'll refer to them as the actors for anyone who hasn't, anyone who's not super familiar. And then the Tom Cruise character very much sees it as a curse. He is almost like taking his revenge upon the world. So
that's
being kind of into psychology and
like,
philosophy.
Screw you! I have to live forever.
Yeah. It's kind of very much taking normal attitudes towards life and exaggerating them by giving them eternal life and seeing how they respond to it. And it gives the characters this constant conflicts, which is more interesting than. I mean, not that the conflicts wouldn't be interesting anyway, but it's the fact that it's coming from these very human, very realistic places. And the two of them are battling it out kind of in their arguments and in their different ways of going about it. Like it's really, really dynamic and really, really good.
Read that now. That actually sounds very compelling.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I'd highly recommend it.
Highlander almost, like two guys battling to the, I mean, they have to kill each other, but like the curse of immortality. Like, yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to say the line. Is someone going to say the line? In a Scottish accent? James? You can.
I don't think I've ever seen it actually.
No, I'm not going there.
Don't pigeonhole James.
Yeah.
Not all Celts are the same.
Look, he's Irish. He's Irish. I mean, that's
Scotland.
Anyway, yeah.
What's the line, Matan? No, you got to say
it. There can be only one. I mean,
there can be
the only one to watch the 90s movies.
Yes, of course.
Anyway, gents, let's move this on.
Duncan MacLeod. Okay.
I'm realizing now that I can.
What a great name is Duncan MacLeod. Just an all-time name.
Out of your
Duncan MacLeod. Sorry, I'm done.
I completely missed the part where we talk about what we've been watching and what we've been writing. Matan, have you been watching anything cool? Are you writing at the moment?
I am trying to write a short story. I'm reading A Tale of Two Cities. I've been slowly going through it while reading other things. I read All My Sons by Arthur Miller recently. I read Night by Elie Wiesel, which is speaking about passive character. First of all, warning, that's a very tough book. Night depicts the story of a kid, a true story going through Auschwitz in World War II. This is his own story told by him. And if there was ever a passive protagonist, he's the one. He's taken from place to place, lives through the horror. But similar to Slaughterhouse-Five, that's the name, right? When you know it's a true story, you kind of accept it, yes, because in real life, sometimes control is wrested away from us, and we're just trying to go moment to moment. Yeah, so going through Tales of Two Cities, which is a great book, lots of interesting characters, a little flat sometimes, but you can't judge them by the same lens because it was written 200 years ago. Fiction has become a bit more, I'd like to say, we care more about the anti-heroes than we used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we definitely do.
We don't accept the Captain Hook anymore. Now there's a movie about Captain Hook being the good guy before Peter Pan, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's on my end.
James, what have you been consuming?
I just finished the Imperium series by Robert Greene, which is Robert Greene kind of does, like, he writes history. I don't think he fictionalizes it too much. I think he gathers up tons and tons of information and then writes a relatively close story to what happened. So the Imperium series is about like when early Rome around the Julius Caesar period. Kind of takes place probably over about 50 years following the lawyer, senator, and later consul and philosopher Cicero, told from the perspective of his slave Taro. And it sort of just is the story of this guy's life. And he just lived at a very interesting time in Roman history where writing had just become far more prevalent. So we have way more information about this period in history than any period previous in Rome. And yeah, it's sort of just about the laws that are going on and the different vying for power and the games that people play and the bureaucracy and the diplomacy and guys standing up in front of the Senate and making big rousing speeches to like get their votes passed. And then the kind of show of force and how Julius Caesar ends up sort of instigating and kind of making himself like the first dictator and using power to kind of overthrow the rule of law. And this is what sort of led to like the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire and all of the Caesars being in charge after that. So really, really good series. If you're into that.
How many books?
3.
That actually sounds great.
I
would enjoy reading.
I'm going to Google that.
Yeah. He has another book that Paddy, I think you'd really like, called The Fatherland, which is set in Germany in the 1960s, sort of a detective novel, but assuming the Nazis won World War II.
It's like The Man in the Castle, isn't it?
Man in the High Castle.
Yeah.
Man in the High Castle.
Yeah, that's
I'll add those to my teetering stack of books.
Yeah.
Alex, what have you been up to, book wise, writing wise, game wise?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Overcooked, which is not exactly high. I've been reading what's it called, The Rules of Traction by Bret Easton Ellis, as I mentioned, which is really good. And look, talk about no character, no plot. No, I wouldn't say no character. There's definitely character to them, but like no plot. It's just literally a bunch of kids drugging and fucking their way around like the school campus. Like that's all it is. It doesn't pretend to be. Anyway, that's really good. Really enjoy that. And also this other book that I've been reading called, what's it called? The Between. I've been reading that, which is about this. It's a little trashy, but it's good. It's like sort of about this video game world that these people find themselves fall into, and they have to take up these roles like, magician, or like they could call different things like there's a murder, a rogue type thing, and basically the roles overtake people. And that's really interesting, and I think that might bloom out into an exciting series. But in terms of writing, I have been just slogging my way through my first draft of, I guess it's the second draft now of my book, and I'm really struggling with that, just like eking out the words. So yeah, that's going pretty well.
Drafting is rough. We really ought to do an episode, I think, on you're a little choppy, but you're still here. We really ought to explore drafting versus first time writing, I think, sometime in a future episode.
I feel personally attacked when that topic comes up.
We all do. It's going to be a lot of like, oh God.
Oh man, please don't bring me up. Please don't bring me up. Please don't ask me about my drafts.
It's too relatable. Alex, give us a quote to seal this deal.
Oh, hang on. What we
reading?
What are we going to?
I'm still making my way through Moby Dick. That's about it, actually. I've been not doing enough reading, and I don't usually watch much TV, so I don't have much to add. I was kind of just avoiding saying anything because,
My
like he's saying,
bad.
I'm kind of still ready.
You know,
for a month now.
Moby Dick is like a dense book. I swear to God, I've been reading Tale of Two Cities, and meanwhile, I've been chugging other books like so easily. Some writing is just dense. It doesn't mean it's not fun. It just takes more out of you.
The
Chewy.
age of the language makes it harder as well.
Chewy.
There's not the same flow because you have to stop and like, I don't really know that sentence structure. I've never heard that word. Yeah.
Exactly.
Were we going to have Matan read something out?
Yes, reading.
Do you want me to? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I have something. I have been told to bring something, so I have brought something. Yes. Okay. Do I give some context or just
Set us up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know as writers we're not supposed to apologize before reading, and if anyone's listening, don't ever apologize before reading something. But I have written this like 3.5 years ago. Okay. It's about the villain of a story I was working on. And the reason I brought this today is because I attempted to display character by having the antagonist go through something towards the very end of the novel. And hopefully the way his reaction was written will display some of his character and make the reader think. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Here we go. A dark spectre lingered outside of Alistair's quarters. A shapeless creature, all dark ends and tendrils of midnight cloak. The black linen ended in a sunset of yellow and red, and a brimming brooch marked this man before he could say but one word. He wore no helm, and his eyes were like the horizon's grey, matching the shadow of hair on his shaved scalp. Above him, however, the real twilight occurred. The sun abandoned the world, drifting past spheres of blood and gold in those foreign skies. A slow decline into the abyss. The dark man allowed Alistair his moment. He remained as stoic as a shadow could ever be. In his murky leather gloves danced the shine of a golden armband. Ossian. The man wordlessly placed the armband in Alistair's hands. He waited. Perhaps he expected Alistair to speak, to ask. Alistair had nothing to say. The spectre of a man left with a bow of his head and took both sunsets with him. Alistair held his son's armband. His colorless, scarred fingers stroked the stag horns carved into the metal. He traced the intricate lines with a careful touch, as if it would otherwise crumble. The gold was cold against his skin. One of the horns is crooked, he suddenly realized. For some reason, that discovery had bothered him. The quarters were dark. He did not bother with the candles. The darkness seemed somehow fitting. He shut the door behind him, choking away the last sliver of twilight before it could interrupt the dimness of his room. Yet a soft glow sneaked from underneath the windows and the veils, curious and disruptive, a shadow of light. Alistair grabbed a bottle in a blind reach of his hand. He poured himself a glass. The smell was pungent, but he could not feel the taste, so he poured another one. He drank that one too, and then he took the bottle and the golden armband to his bed. He stared into the blackness for a while in between long, bland sips. His eyes could not adjust to the darkness, he realized. It's too dark. He looked to where he knew his windows were, but the gentle light was gone. He dropped the empty bottle beside him and thought of his daughter, whom he had not visited in a long time. Ossian promised he'll go see her. Alistair turned to lay on his side. His armor should have made him uncomfortable, but he could not feel a thing. It was his daughter's birthday today. She was 9 years old, but then again, she had been 9 years old for a very long time. Alistair dreamt of home, and when he awoke, it was prematurely to the suffocating scent of smoke. That's him discovering his son was killed in action. This is the villain of the story.
Nice. I love that line about his daughter only being 9 years old, but she'd been 9 for a very long time.
Yeah, me too. That was talk about saying a lot with a little. I found that very intriguing. Why has she only been 9 for a long time? Why has she been 9 for a long time?
Make your guesses. Basically, she's
zombie.
Well, no, she passed away, and he was left with his one son. His son is so this guy is a general. His son is one of his captains in this army. They're like the bad guys' army. He's been chasing the protagonist for most of the book, and while he's chasing the protagonist, his son, who is around the same age as the protagonist, dies in action.
Is this for Absolution?
No, this is first book I ever wrote, which is firmly locked in a crypt 12 feet beneath the ground, where it will stay until,
I gotta say, I actually thought this was recent writing because some of that stuff was really good. Like the whole description of the light and at the beginning, that was beautiful. I haven't read the rest though, so maybe it's a car wreck, but that was really good.
Maybe the rest is
I like the depth of him having a son that's the same age as the protagonist, but him having lost his son in battle. I think there's great room for conflict there within the antagonist. That's really good.
Beautiful example of character.
Sounded better the first time I said it.
All right. So unless I'm missing out anything again, which from the list of things I can see, I am not. Alex, do you want to close us out with a quote?
The one I wanted to read, I'll give you some context. It's between interview between Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, and basically, George R.R. Martin asks him like, "Hey, look, I just see you putting out all these books all the time. How do you just get up and write every day? Like, how do you not just check your emails and then self-loathe for a while and go to the fridge, check the fridge, go back and just talking about how he's really struggling to write, obviously, those last couple of books." And Stephen King, he says a lot of other stuff as well, but the first thing he says is, "Look, George, there are books and there are books." And I just think that so perfectly encapsulates the essence of both writers' style. Martin just writes these big, long-winded tomes that are very detailed and very, technically, he spends years and years on them. And King's just like, no, just dash this off in 3 months. And I love both of their books. Personally, I prefer Stephen King's books, but there are books and there are books. I just think that's a great line.
There are books and there are books. Well, this has been a lot of fun. This has been Precipice Fiction once again. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, listener, the most important part of the show. And we will see you again, hopefully next week, hopefully with Matan again. Fingers crossed, if time zones align. But until then, have fun, keep writing, and we will speak to you then.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, a Precipice Fiction podcast.